My name is Ann Coy. I am the Healing City Baltimore coordinator. I work closely with Councilmember Cohen here in Baltimore City to support the Elijah Cummings Healing City Act and to support the Healing City movement that we have here in community in Baltimore. We are excited to continue the conversations that were started this morning. We will start with a panel here from 12:30 to 1:30, focused on community-based peace building. We're going to take a deep dive looking at the grassroots community-based peace building work that is happening here in Baltimore, in New York, and in Washington, D.C., and around the country. And I am so excited to introduce to you all my friend and colleague, Shantae Jackson, who is the director of the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement here in Baltimore. Welcome, Shantae. We are so excited to have you here to moderate this panel. So I am going to turn the time over to you and allow you to introduce our panelists.
Thank you so much, Anne. Before I start with the introductions of the panelists who are joining me in a moment, want to take the time to say that the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement is so very proud to be a supporter of the 2022 Healing City Summit. We're working hand in hand with residents in our city and community partners to be really intentional about addressing systemic inequities and trauma that have plagued our city for generations. We want to make sure that we have Baltimoreans at the forefront of these efforts because we understand how crucial it is in demonstrating our commitment toward a trauma-responsive, healing-centered, and equity-based approach to neighborhood health and to safety for everyone. We're really happy to be a part of the work that's elevating resident voices and collaborating in new and innovative ways, and looking forward to what a truly healed Baltimore City looks like. So jumping right into it, I am so happy to be joined by three folks who I spend a decent amount of time with, both virtually and physically, and for us just to jump into the conversation today. So we're joined by Erica Bridgeford, who is the co-founder of Baltimore Ceasefire, along with being joined by Erica Ford, who is the co-founder of Life Camp in New York City. And then last but not least, Greg Jackson, who is the executive director for Community Justice Action Fund, which is headquartered in Washington, D.C., but obviously supports us all at a national level. Folks, thanks for joining me. So let's jump into it here. So this is the third Healing City Summit. We've been brought together today by the Open Society Foundation and Healing City Baltimore to address the legacy of trauma and racism in our cities. Can each of you take a couple of minutes to describe the work that you're doing and how you support healing within your respective communities? We'll start with E because we're in Baltimore. And then we'll kind of rotate around. So we'll go with E and then Erica and have Greg close us out for this first round of questions.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. It's so exciting to see everybody all together today. With the work of Baltimore Ceasefire 365 specifically, we do a few things to help address the pain associated with violence and murder in Baltimore. And so one is just addressing the hopelessness that occurs when communities are impacted by violence so often. And so reminding us that we can create our own narrative, we can create joy and inject the city with joy anytime we feel like it. And so one thing we do is 4 times a year, we call a ceasefire in the community that people all over the city are asking for 2 things: be peaceful and celebrate life. And so giving ourselves permission to say that our lives matter, celebrating life matters, and being intentional intentional about how we navigate conflicts is really important. And it's not just about people who we think are shooters, but that all of us have responsibility to be more peaceful. And so it helps to heal those places within us that believe that we're not able to be peaceful as a city, that we should just throw the whole city away and we're always going to have this kind of trauma. But we're saying no, a part of our healing is accepting and admitting who we are, who we're created to be, and who we decide to be in the world. But then also when people are killed, changing the way that we respond to murder in the city by showing up at spaces to bless them, to claim them as sacred ground, and to wrap our arms around families however they need us to.
Thank you so much, E. Erica?
Beautiful, beautiful. And we've had the privilege of coming down and working with E on the ground. We brought the Peace Mobile out. We took part in the healing circles because trauma is in the beginning, the middle, and the end of violence. And so for our people, we have generational trauma that is entwined in the hearts and souls, unfortunately, of our children and our families. And so helping them heal, helping them identify their traumas, helping them to get access to the tools that they need to see life and see the remedy of their pain in a different way, helps us not only reduce violence, but helps us shift the narrative from generational trauma to generational wealth, to generational joy, to generational happiness, to generational building of community. Because unfortunately, I'm in California right now. Last week I was in Atlanta. The week before that, I was in another city. I don't remember which one it was. But in each city, if you go to the areas in which Black and brown people live, it's under-resourced, it's under-invested. It is a space where trauma lives, right? And so doing the healing city work, doing the work of getting people access to therapists and therapy and unconventional activities like the Peace Mobile, where we can mobilize peace, where we can mobilize healing, it is of its utmost importance and necessity. And I love taking part in these conversations in these buildings and understanding that city limits don't limit us, right? That we are here to work together as a people, as Black and brown people across the nation, across the world. We have to remember the concept of it takes a village and we are all each other's village.
Thank you so much for that, Erica. And last but not least, Greg, talk to us about the work you do and how you support healing within your community.
Yeah, I think it's important to introduce this quick personal story. I was someone who had been working in politics for years, but became a survivor of gun violence after being shot in 2013. And I'll never forget turning on the TV in my hospital room and watching senators talk about gun violence as if it was like a political topic or a political issue that they could get to later. And while I'm fighting for my life, I'm watching them just dismiss this issue. And that struck a nerve with me personally, and was part of the reason why our organization was founded. We noticed that in our communities, our voices were being heard last, and they were only here. Our voices of pain and trauma was being heard only to tell stories, but not to inform policy or to fight for change in our communities. Despite, of the 100,000 people who are shot or injured every year, the majority of them are us. It's our Black and brown communities that are suffering, but the policies weren't reflecting that. The policies were focused on suburban violence, was focused on mass shootings, was focused on school shootings, but overlooking the pain and trauma that was destroying our neighborhoods. And so we were founded to help change that, and not by just pushing policy, but centering the people who've been harmed, centering the solutions that exist that Erica is working on. Both Ericas are working so hard on, and Director Jackson are working on, and making sure that the first voice that's heard at the table are the people that are in the communities doing the work, that are fighting to heal and really restore our communities every single day. And so that's why we are here. That is our focus, is how do we fight for political change that uplifts the communities, but most importantly, empowers those warriors out there that are healing and serving our communities every day. And so we've been excited to contribute that way and fighting for you all every day. And in turn, we think that building political power is part of how we heal our communities and frankly, protect our communities.
Thank you so much. You all have left me with so many questions now that I can ask, just given my connection to you individually and also together. So know that I'm going to be picking some of the pieces apart of the things that each of you have mentioned. I'm going to come back to Erica Ford, who mentioned bringing the Peace-Mobile from New York down to Baltimore City and partnering with in sharing that and showcasing it in Baltimore City. I know that and I've had conversations for a few years now about wanting to have a large resource vehicle here in Baltimore City. And then Erica Ford and I had a conversation about what it looks like in New York. The Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement is outfitting a bus as we speak that is going to be Baltimore's Peace-Mobile. So interested in hearing the three of you talk about what you think that's going to mean for our city, given what it's meant for New York, what you envision it's going to do to contribute to the healing of Baltimore City, and how it can become a symbol of hope. So we'll start with Erica here, given that she's got the original Peace-Mobile, and then circle through Greg and E.
Yes, and for the people who don't know, let me describe to you what the Peace-Mobile is. The Peace-Mobile is a big orange 35-foot mobile recreational vehicle. And when you walk on the vehicle, you get the scent of lavender, which is the aromatherapy that takes over your spiritual being and like just brings you into the bus. And then you walk through Kepper's Kitchen, where we teach you how to eat more alkaline than acidic, because we know that your diet plays a valuable part in your transformation of who you are and how you show up. And then we have a couch area where we have healing circles, and parents who have been directly impacted by gun violence hold space where they can gather and have conversation, or just have mediations there with people who don't understand why they have conflict with each other. We have a space in the back that we use as a transformational space where we can do the sound baths and the different kind of meditations and one-on-one sessions. But we also have a place where we can work with the young people to do computer sessions and virtual reality and all of those different things, to just, or we have a punching bag where you could just get it out, you know, and you could punch the bag and release, because we go to the hospitals at those critical times where families lose loved ones and have that rage and anger and want retaliation. So instead of retaliation, we show them how they can get their anger out. And then when you walk to the back of the bus, which you're like, all of this on a bus? Yes. And the back of the bus has a full recording studio where we teach you how to put your pain on beats, and you could go in the sound booth and you could just scream, or you could be like Greg G, like, you know, the one and only. You could be an MC and just let it flow and let the healing grow and just do it all. 1, 2, 3, it's pain on beats up in this Baltimore streets now. But the Peace-Mobile is about mobilizing healing, and when it shows up, it just allows you to just take control of the space, and people are like, here comes the orange bus. It just changes the mindset of folks on site and just brings something different. So that's our Peace-Mobile, and I think that it's going to be a tremendous impact in Baltimore because of the togetherness of the city. And when I say that, you know, it's the areas in which a lot of this is happening. It's family space, you know, and so that bus will dominate space and change the conversation and give people direct access to healing.
Thank you so much. Greg, just given what you've seen across the country, how do you see or foresee a Peace-Mobile impacting a city like Baltimore as we work toward healing?
Yeah, I mean, we need a Peace-Mobile in every city, frankly, every community that's suffering from gun violence right now. You know, I think about my neighborhood, for example, and to get to the nearest high school or the nearest library or the nearest grocery store, you'll pass 6 or 7 police cars, sirens on all day, all night. You'll pass street vigils where there's bottles and teddy bears out. And there's all these constant reminders of trauma, of threat, of policing, of incarceration, of jail. And where is the hope? You know, where's the hope? Where's the inspiration on our streets? And right now it doesn't exist. And it's not going to happen. The law enforcement is not going to do that. And unfortunately, the government in most cities are not going to do that. It's going to take community and community leaders and people who really care about our own children and our own sisters and brothers to be on the front line of that and to be able to kind of breathe that hope and healing into our communities. And that's what the Peace Mobile is doing. And it's amazing that it's going to be happening in Baltimore. I really wish there was one on my street, because the brightest youth of the future, the doctors, the lawyers, the future senators, they're all right here. You know, they're all in our communities, just like any other community. What's missing is the investment, the hope, and the healing. And I think the Peace Mobile is a great way to kind of inject that into a neighborhood and show that, hey, the community cares about the community, and we want to give you what you deserve and what communities everywhere else are getting. And so I think it's powerful. It's something we're a big advocate for, and we'll continue to be an advocate for. And I'm really proud of Baltimore for stepping up and doing this. And I know we're working on DC too, so I'm excited to help Erica on that.
Thank you for that. So E, you and I have been talking about this bus for a couple of years now, right? We have been envisioning a bus. I think even long before either one of us knew Erica Ford, we were talking about a bus. It's so interesting how intentional the universe is around just sending out the vibrations that need to come down, whether they're coming from New York City or from the West Coast all the way over. What did you envision when you were thinking about, you know, having what we were calling the big, I think we called it a big bus. We needed
just called the bus.
Talk about what you were envisioning, and just given what you've experienced seeing Erica Ford's bus from Life Camp, like how do you see this playing out for the city in ways that root us in healing?
Yeah. So first I want to say, I said this to Erica and her team personally, but I think it's important, since we have this many people here, to understand the context in which they brought that peace bus down to Baltimore. It was because we had lost Dante Tater Boxdale to murder, one of our Safe Streets workers who is an icon around the country in this peace work. And we were doing the sacred space ritual, and without even blinking, they got on the road and came down with that bus and hibiscus tea, and you know, and it was just amazing. So thank you for that. And it is hugely an example of what it really means when we say I am because we are, right? That we as a city were torn apart by this loss, and people around the country were feeling it, and you all coming down gave that you know, like it put the glue, you know, helped to put some of our pieces back together. So thank you again for that. My vision for the bus, it came to me, like, I think right after the very first ceasefire weekend, because suddenly I was on the front of the newspaper, and there were, you know, everybody was talking about this movement that started in Baltimore. And so it dawned on me, like, what would happen if there was a bus that rode into your neighborhood and you just said to people, get on this bus and we will help to change and heal your life. That there will be a whole life assessment. What is going on with you and your baby mother and your grandmother and your children, and like what's all of it, and how can we do this assessment and connect you immediately to resources. And the bus would have, you know, certain kinds of resources. People even said they wanted like little things to be on there, like a little corner store that had immediate kinds of things that people need to buy and stuff like that. But we did community brainstorms about it. But the idea was that the credibility would be built of the movement, that if you see this bus, you're going to believe that they actually will help you. That is not just something that's rolling through, but they're actually going to follow through and stay with you and help you. So I think what I've seen on the Peace Mobile, I have to say that punching bag was one of my favorite parts of the bus because like right now I'm experiencing the kind of rage that I can only get through by going somewhere and like breaking a bunch of glass and plates. And, you know, like my friends are literally scheduling that for me right now, just from going through thing after thing after thing. And it's hugely important. We've made a commitment to start saying spiritual and energetic truths out loud. So for example, having that lavender as soon as people get on the bus, right? You know, there are unseen things that are factual happenings in our bodies and in our energy, in our vibration. So what it does for your brain coming in and smelling that lavender, how it relaxes your body, how it raises your vibration, having things that really heal us from the inner crevices of our being to the outer parts of us is really important. And I love how this bus addresses pieces from our insides to our needing to punch something on the outside.
Thank you for that. So it's a reminder of this need to take care of what an author who I read not long ago mentioned, our pods, right? Our physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual selves in every single way that we can. And I'm just gonna say that for those who know me, I keep lavender sage spray in my office to make sure that folks who need or feel like they need to be cleansed can be cleansed, and so that I can cleanse myself in my space often. That was not a pitch for a particular product, but just a demonstration of being keenly aware of what you need to facilitate your own healing, given the moments of work that we find ourselves in. Greg, I'm going to shift to the political piece now, right? So that's the piece that I pulled out from what you mentioned. The Open Society Foundation obviously works to foster democracy across our entire globe. And in a lot of ways, it feels like democracy is under threat, both here and abroad. We've seen regimes like Putin's Russia invade nations like the Ukraine. We've seen a former president of the United States attempt to subvert and overturn an election. All the while, we're dealing with racism and Semitism and xenophobia and prejudice every single day here in this country. Talk about the importance of building democracy, if you will, at a local or a community level, and why it's so important for people to participate. I'm going to start with you.
That was a lot. Now you got me talking about the whole world now.
It's deep, guys. It's deep.
I think I know this might not be the same answer as most people expect, but I feel like all politics are local. And the way that we really bring about change is from starting from the bottom up and building community in our own precincts and neighborhoods. And that's why in 2020, we actually launched a campaign called Elect Justice. And we worked in Wisconsin and Texas. And we only focused on the neighborhoods that have been suffering most from gun violence, recognizing that these are also the same neighborhoods that the political system had given up on. And so we saw that there were lower voter turnout levels, that there were lower support levels. And we said, well, imagine if we actually engaged them and talked about the issues they care about and see what happens. What we saw was that those same precincts and neighborhoods outperformed all the other precincts in the city. And that when you invest in communities that are suffering the most, they're also the most passionate and frankly, the most powerful. If folks just invest in their communities and really invest in their voter turnout and their voter engagement. And so I think that was a good testament to how we should attack this, as opposed to overlooking those who are suffering from poverty or suffering from racism or oppression or even gun violence. We should pour into those communities, knowing that they're the most powerful activists and voters we have in our country. And so that's kind of how we look at it. And I think that's something that, you know, if America kind of shifted its political focus that way, we would see leaders from our inner cities and the communities like Baltimore leading the charge on national issues, just the way that Mayor Scott is right now. You know, Mayor Scott is arguably one of the most influential mayors in the country about community violence approaches and strategy. And he comes straight from those neighborhoods and straight from those communities. And if someone didn't invest in him, he wouldn't be at the forefront of this and meeting at the White House and informing Biden and Congress on how to attack these issues. And so I think you all have a prime example of how high someone can go if you invest in them in their own communities, even if it is a community that's been historically overlooked. And so I think if we can just pour into our people, pour into our neighborhoods, pour into our precincts, empower the people within, the leaders of tomorrow are there. They're not They're not on a plane in West Virginia. They're not Joe Manchin with a private jet. They're not Senator Schumer in New York. You know, it's not these rich, wealthy folks that are going to change the world. I think it's going to be people from our communities. And by investing in these strategies like Open Society aspires to do, I think we can kind of create this new movement of leaders that we need. And so that's kind of my approach on it, so hopefully that's helpful.
It is. I'd ask the other panelists if they have anything they'd like to add here around, how we figure this out locally, how we create a democracy locally that really drives change that we need to see for our neighborhoods and cities. Erica, when you're ready.
Definitely. And I would just change one thing, that Open Society is not aspiring, they are doing it. And they are investing in a lot of people on the ground to uplift the voices and transform what we see and how we participate in it. And I would just say for myself, in December 12th, 1987, I attended a rally. And that rally had all of the top Black folks at that time who were everything, right? And that rally, quote, woke me up, right? To understand that there's more to the world than just driving around trying to be cute, and chasing guys and all of that, right? And so that day, I committed to doing something else. And I became a political voice. I became an organizer and really made history and changed a lot of political processes and woke people up and engaged people and had people out in the streets around various issues, right? And I'm still here 34 years later, right? And so what we do impacts voice, impacts change, impacts, and then from that, I and my friends took a concept to the mayor's office in New York City, and it was adapted. And from that, it built the New York City crisis management system. It built the first office to prevent gun violence, right? Which is now something that is all over the United States, right? And so it invested in brothers and sisters coming home from jail to not just have a job, but to have a job that gives them a place of leadership where they're standing shoulder to shoulder with NYPD, directing public safety in their community, right? And so those things changed the elements of the community to where it made them now reduce arrests, now reduce the number of young people that were being directly impacted by NYPD. They had the authority to stand to NYPD and say, no, you're not going to do this today. And it didn't happen, right? And so we were able to negotiate peace in our community. We were able to change policies in New York City. We were able to make New York City the safest city in America, right? And spring off things for all over the nation, right? And so if we look at that, if we had the ability to do that, right? Prior to us doing that work, there was 17 people shot a year and 4 people killed a year, right? Just on gun violence, right? So if we changed the climate to having 4 years where nobody was killed and 562 days where no one was shot, we changed the economic investments of that area. We changed the ability for people to commerce in that area more freely, to engage, to raise their children differently, to purchase homes and fill the house rate. So those things that we did that we might have looked at as small attributes really changed the climate. And so if you look at what Greg said about all politics is local, if we stay steadfast on our role and our position and get partners like Open Society, like the mayor's office in different cities, we are not only able to transform communities, because then we're raising the consciousness level of people, right? Because you're reducing their fear, you're having them invest in themselves and now become politically conscious about who to vote for, who to put into office, running people for, because now when you look at New York City, the people who are in the office are those people that were on the battleground with us, right? And so we were able to, over those years, develop, train, and now have people in office intentionally to change the diagram of what is going on. We were able to, Greg, right, get the White House to invest $5 billion. These things didn't happen by accident. They're in 16 cities doing demonstration projects around community violence intervention, right? That didn't happen by accident. That happened by our voices, right? And so we are able to change the you know what I'm saying, to balance out the things, but we have to keep going because we've got a lot of work to do, right? Because they saw us And now they want to invest in more police. They want to raise the conversation of more police. They want to put an infrastructure of guns in our community, right? And so we have to stand fast, stronger together to just keep it growing and going, because Russia's a distraction.
Thank you for that. I see some questions coming in the chat. Eric, I'm going to come to you in a second. I'm going to come to you in a second. Here's a good time for me to let folks know who have joined us that we're going to be starting to pose your questions to the panelists in about 15 minutes. So feel free to start to queue those up, and folks will make sure that we have them so that we can get answers to your questions right away. Anything to close here around the local political atmosphere associated with making sure that cities get the healing that they need and deserve?
Yeah, I just want to put an exclamation point on the things that Greg and Erica are saying about how one person really can make a difference. One voice, one thing you've gone through, one shift you made in your mind there's the reverb effect, like once it's hit you and you're saying it out loud, those are waves that are going out beyond you. And so all of the stories that we're hearing right now, all of the facts that we're hearing right now come from one person had a feeling, had a thought, had an experience, and decided not to sit on it, not to swallow it, not to give in to the thoughts about, well, who am I to be this person out here saying blah, blah, blah? Who am I to be trying to do blah, And in particular, violence and murder are such arrogant energies, like they really, really make you feel like there's absolutely nothing you can do about us. We are here to stay. We've been around since the beginning of time. What you think you're going to do about this, right? It does make you feel so hopeless and helpless. And so having strong examples out in the world about saying out loud the things, your personal experience and what really helps to heal, but also keep giving voice to the things that we know continue violent systems of oppression that then create violence and murder in our communities, and making sure that we don't let those conversations go by the wayside, that we call things exactly what they are in the work, and that we continue to heal the places within policies, within legislature, within local community policy making, like all of those things that we're saying out loud. Where is there violent systems being nurtured that we need to dismantle and heal so that we can then see less and less murder in our streets?
So I'm going to pause here just to say that I could never have enough time to talk to the three of y'all with all of Baltimore City. Like we could talk about this for hours and hours, because you're making so many points that I just want to bring up to the top and ask more questions about. So I'm going to try to tamp down my geek girl giddiness having the three of y'all on this panel as we have this conversation, and narrow in on a point that E just made about one voice can matter. So to the extent that each of you feel comfortable, would you mind sharing with us who you look to as role models in this work and how you pour into the next generation for folks that are looking to you right now and trying to figure out how they begin to pour?
Since I'm the
into the next
youngest,
generation?
look, since I'm the youngest, I'm gonna go first.
All you, go for it.
I look to a lot of people on this work. I look to a lot of people. I look to Greg. I look to Pastor Mike. I look to Kepra. I look to Viola Plummer, who was the leader of the December 12th movement, our modern day Harriet Tubman. And there's so many folks that I look to. But in terms of continuing is participating in stuff like that, it's coming here because I'm here in LA because one of my first young people in Life Camp received the Billboard in Women in Music Executive Award. And so, because we poured into her, she was able to take those lessons and make an impact in the music industry, right? And so it is continuing to show up when young people call. It is to go around and participate and hopefully have people like Open Society. I see you, Mo, invest in my ability to tell my story and to use my voice. So we're working on a documentary of Life Camp so that we can inspire. We're working on opening up our own Peace Institute where we can train and teach folks with the Black and Brown Peace Coalition. We have weekly or bi-weekly calls so that young people can come on and literally learn from us and ask us questions, and working with grant writers to give our, not give, but, you know, to help build other cities so that we can take it around the nation and just help. And that's why we were in Atlanta last week for Atlanta Peace Week. And we just look to partner because you don't know to hold on. You know to grow, right? To grow those around you. And that's what information is for. And so I am a sponge ready to be used to soak.
Thank you. Greg?
All right, I'll go next.
Oh.
So wait, the question is, who do I look to, right?
Who do you look to as role models? And then how do you pour into the next generation?
Oh my
Right?
goodness. Okay,
mean,
well, I'll
yeah,
start with how
I-
I pour into the next generation. Let me start
Okay.
there. So I have been a person that I believe I just talk about everything I do and then I pull everybody into it, right? So my children are all mediators. My son now works at the Community Mediation Center as an intake person because he did a year of AmeriCorps a few years ago, going into prisons, doing reentry mediation. You know, I bring my grandbabies with me, my, you know, people I've grown up with, youth that I've met over the years. I bring them to things with me. So for me, I learn a lot by other people's example, by watching. And so that for me, that's how I pour into other people. I believe that I can only control from the top of my head to the tips of my toes, and I can't make anybody else do anything. I'm aware that I have influence, but that influence can only happen if I'm being present with really what's going on inside of me. So I'm doing my own healing work. I'm doing my own, you know, I'm taking care of me so that when I show up in the world, my example is one that people are looking at like, wow, I think I can do that, you know. So that's one piece. Who I look to, I believe in leadership by team. And so I keep people around me who tell me the truth about myself, good, bad, and everything in the middle. I have people around me who I can tell the truth to about hard things that I'm going through or beautiful things that I'm looking forward to. But I would say mostly, if I'm going to be honest about mostly who I listen to and who I turn to, it's ancestors. It's the entire spirit realm. I am a huge, I feel like Harriet Tubman might be like my spirit mother or something crazy, because I literally have the mindset that it doesn't matter why I'm supposed to be doing something. Most of the time, I don't know why I'm called to do or not do something, down to taking a meeting, returning a phone call, or leading a protest. Like, I'm only doing it if God said it's okay. I'm only doing it if I have permission and guidance about what I'm supposed to be saying, what I'm supposed to be doing, if it's a right fit for me at this time, you know, what kind of energy I'm going to bring to the thing that's to be done, all of that stuff. And so I mostly lean on the spirit realm to guide me and gird me up in this work, because before it is a physical battle, it is a spiritual battle.
Thank you. Right?
Yeah, it's hard. This is kind of an emotional question. You know, there are people before me that inspire me so much, like Erica Ford, who I've always been honored just to be in the same room, especially on the same Zoom and advocating alongside. But there's also, you know, people who aren't here to fight for this. And that's who really inspires me. One of my mentees, who I talk about a lot, was named Karan Brown in DC, and he hosted his own Stop the Violence rally, you know, at 11 years old, and in his neighborhood, and 2 weeks later was shot and killed, you know, by a grown man, and intentionally, you know. And I think about him all the time, because it's like, if we had been, if, I don't know, it's maybe it's survivor's guilt, but if we had been doing this work 40, 50 years ago, he wouldn't have to have that rally. He wouldn't have to risk his life at a McDonald's, you know, trying to get a snack, you know, like, he would be moving on to be a football player or a lawyer or a doctor or whatever he belonged to, you know, what he should have been, and he's gone, you know. Devon McNeil, who 1 block from where I'm zooming in now, was shot and killed at a peace cookout that I helped organize. And I wasn't there, coincidentally, because I had something else going on, but to watch him, you know, his mother was a violence intervention specialist, an interrupter here, and she lost her son, you know, at a peace cookout. And she's still doing the work, you know, she didn't quit. And it's people like that, you know, the Dante Barksdales of the world, who believed in this with every fiber in his body, and I think even past, doesn't regret a second of it. And I think those are the people sorry, I'm getting a little emotional, but those are people who inspire me, because I just, you know, we shouldn't have to do this work. You know, this is work we do not because of course we love our people, but this is ridiculous. Like, this is stuff that we're doing out of survival. And every day I think about family and friends and even little cousins and nieces and nephews, and I worry, like, what type of trauma are they going to have to survive because America's not willing to do what they need to do. And so that's what inspires me. It kind of keeps that fire burning. It's not necessarily the most happy, you know, glorious inspiration. It's more just concern, you know, concern for our future and concern for our families, but also believing that the people who have passed, they didn't pass in vain. And I bring that same spirit with me every time we go to the Congress or the Hill. Like, I know people get annoyed because I'm always dropping personal stories, but I want to remind people that these aren't numbers and stats. You know, these aren't gravestones. These are children. These are brothers. These are sisters. These are mothers. These are fathers, you know, and these would have been ancestors, right? And they've been lost because policy can't get it together. Our country doesn't care enough. The fact that we can send $6.4 billion to Ukraine in a heartbeat, but it's been taking years, 30 years for Erica of the world to get resources for her community. It just shows that priority is not there. And, you know, of course I support Ukraine, but I think you'll understand what I'm saying. And yeah, I just think that those folks who've been lost, and those folks who have been harmed is what inspires me every day. And knowing that they got to keep maneuvering through life every day and find that motivation to wake up, that I could find that motivation to fight alongside great leaders like the two Ericas here and you, Shantae. So that's what keeps me motivated. And I pray that there's less people to motivate me in that way.
Thank you so much for your answer too. Just want to pause here and say that I consider each of you as role models for me in different and unique ways, given the different and unique relationships that we have. I go together with one of y'all more than the other two, and that person knows who they are. But I would also say, Greg, no need to apologize for the emotions, right? A part of what we know has to be the healing work that happens not just in Baltimore City, but in New York City and every single country in this, or a city in this country, is the humanization of us all. And what that means, it means that we get to show up in all of our humanity, and that's always not going to be sunshine and roses. I would also offer that Karan and Dante and others do stand as your ancestors right now and aren't gone anywhere. Every time those knees feel wobbly or that back feels like somebody's holding it and there's nobody back there, that's them. And we all know that and appreciate them so deeply as ancestors in the work that they're affording us the opportunity to do now. Something that I share with my kids and with folks who know me well is that I'm a firm believer that we're doing ancestor work while we're alive right now. right? And that very much is how I pour into the next generation in the work that we're doing. So we're at about 1:15. I'm going to open up the floor to questions. If you've got questions, share them in the chat. And while that's happening, I'm going to ask you all on the panel here to answer one final question from me before I turn it over. So last year, I had the wonderful opportunity of hosting a session where we really talked about what a healing or a healed Baltimore would look like. I asked folks to close their eyes and take 3 deep breaths and then like share via chat, like what would a healing or a healed city look like for Baltimore? I don't want to repeat that question this time. I want to ask a different one, a related one, but a different one. So we asked last year what we would see when we opened our eyes and saw a totally healed Baltimore City. I'm gonna ask you all to tell me what you see next month in our progression toward that healing. What's different next month, right? So that we can begin to start to take the steps. We talked about the foundation pour that the Biden administration is helping us with. We talked about there being no time like this time, all of the work that's happening in Baltimore and across the country. From each of your perspectives, like what's the very next step in 30 to 60 days around getting to that healed place? And we all understand that healing is perpetual, right? And what's the next step? Whoever would like to take that first. And would also ask folks to put that in the chat too. So what happens in the next 30 to 60 days here in Baltimore City that tells you that we're headed on the right path toward becoming a healed city?
So I think I have a pretty quick answer for this. Because again, my perception is about what I can change is me, and then trust and have faith about how those vibrations are spreading outward. And so if I'm thinking about in my next 30 to 60 days, things that I'm doing, things that I'm working on internally, then what I'm gonna see as signs of healing is I'm gonna see people stopping me at red lights saying thank you for what it is that you're doing. I'm gonna meet families at somebody's sacred space ritual who is going, somebody who couldn't have imagined that they could show up in the space where they lost their loved one to murder, and they're gonna show up in that space and they're gonna kiss the ground, and they're gonna, they're gonna feel something different about it. That there will be people getting, and it's happening every single day, that we're being honest with each other sooner, that we are calling things what they really are around oppression and systems and the kind of violence that happens politically, that we're going to see more people being honest sooner. We're going to see more people being more transparent about what's actually happening and where the challenges actually are in the policy making and all of that sort of thing. But I think that it is, Tata said that there's a triumph in every tragedy. So when I'm thinking about like 30 days out, very often we're thinking about like what we're worried about, what's upcoming, what's happening, what's going on. And so, but signs of healing, you get to see the triumphs and the tragedies when you're actually doing the work, when you're like this, one step at a time, one breath at a time. And I want to say out loud to Greg, I'm in the process of typing you a long personal chat, but I want to say out loud that signs of healing is watching a Black man cry on a Zoom at a conference, like with cornrows in his head, like everything, I'm so serious right now. Like there's so much about the way that we're socialized that tells us this is a thing you cannot see. You cannot see men taking ownership of their pain, and speaking it out loud and using it toward not just their healing, but all of our healing, for saying out loud the stuff we go through with our survivor's guilt. Like all saying these things out loud are signs of our healing. And it's not just at the level where we think, oh, well, those are community members and those are leaders. No, that we're all one thing. And so when you see leaders saying out loud on Zooms, crying their tears out loud, that means you're seeing healing happen for all of us.
Thank you. Gonna ask the rest of for Greg and Erica to take just a couple of minutes. I want to make sure that we allow some space for some community questions too here. So your thoughts.
Well, I'll be very quick. In 30 days, I'll be 57, and I'll be celebrating another year on this earth, and also passing closer to passing over the running of the day-to-day operation of Life Camp to the next generation of Life Camp, and closer to building the Peace Institute and creating the roadway for more cities to duplicate what it is that we're doing here in New York City. So I see the greatness rising every single day.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, we'll have a Peace Mobile in Baltimore, so that'll be dope. And thank you, Erica, again for your kind words. I also, look, I'm relentless on this. I mean, I really think that we're gonna get some funding passed federally in the next 30 days, and it might not be the full $5 billion that's in the Build Back Better Act because of all that drama there. But we do know the president's fiscal year 2022 budget, it will be up for a vote. And I think we'll have $200 million that's already included in there voted on. And that would be historic. You know, prior to the work that Erica and I have been doing, advocating for funding, America's never put more than $14 million into healing and intervention programs for our communities. 14 million, right? Of a multi-trillion-dollar budget. And so to go from that to 200 million and hopefully 5 billion soon, that's historic. And I think we're right there. I also will share that, you know, the White House shared guidance about state level funding and said, hey, we'll give you COVID relief funds, but part of that needs to go towards these strategies. And they sent that guidance out directly from the White House, Department of Treasury, Department of Education. And right now we're at $1,953 million of local commitments. And so I believe in the next 30 days, we'll break that $2 billion mark where states and cities all over the country are trying to build what Baltimore is doing. And that's a direct testament to the advocacy work federally, but also the Fund Peace Network across the country that's been doing advocacy work locally to make sure that cities and states are invested in this way too. And so I think there's those two big victories will happen in the next 30 days. My birthday is the same week as Erica's too, April 5th. So, you know, I'm turning 37, so I'm a little bit behind you there.
It's generations on this call, generations.
Few generations, yeah. So, but I'm excited. So, yeah, I think we'll be celebrating some amazing victories together in the next 30 days. And most importantly, taking some pressure off the cities so that, you know, Director Jackson is not trying to push and pull her budget to make things happen, but the government federally steps in and supports the work that y'all are doing.
Thank you so much. Thank all of you so much for your time. I'm going to jump right into a couple of questions that we've got coming in from the panel. And whoever actually addressed the issue during the conversation is who I'll direct the question to. So I'm only going to ask for one respondent, just given what I'm seeing here. Greg, this is for you. The Moms Demand Action gun violence survivors in Baltimore are so good at telling our stories and being healing warriors, but how do we effectively engage in policy? Sometimes we're just exhausted by the day-to-day fight and trying to find the right place in the mayor's office to engage with. Any advice?
Yeah, I will share. We actually built a coalition for the whole state of Maryland that's focused on addressing this. And we have about 40 members in there. We would love to invite you all to join us. And our whole focus is how do we move policy to bring about change in the state and in the city. And we've done a lot of phenomenal work at the state level and done a lot of phenomenal work supporting the mayor and what's happening in Baltimore. But I will say there's still a lot of low hanging fruit as far as policy goes. We need to make updates to the Medicaid policy. We need to make updates to victims' compensation that comes out of VOCA at the state level. A lot of what Baltimore's doing is not happening in PG County. It's not happening in Montgomery County. It's not happening across the state. And unfortunately, in places like PG County, you're seeing a similar surge in violence. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities. The cool thing about our coalition, though, is that we have policy experts, we have lobbyists. So a lot of the policy solutions that you're trying to figure out what to push for, they're doing that thinking for you. And you can focus on sharing your stories and being the grassroots power, as opposed to trying to figure out all the policy ideas that need to be pushed and pulled on. So I would invite you to join us. And I think it's a good lesson for everybody to, you know, while you may be the people in the community, the advocates on the ground, or the people with the stronger stories, sometimes it's great to partner and work together, because folks have different ideas and different solutions, and frankly, different skill sets that can complement your work. So I invite you to join us. Just send me an email.
Thank you. Erica, this question's for you, Ford. Can you talk a bit about how the healing work relates to recovering from mass incarceration and what it might look like for returning citizens? I just saw you push your whole hair back when like, okay.
You know why? I thought it was easy, right? I stepped into this, had a conversation on my couch in my house with Tupac Shakur, this young man named Stretch, who was Tupac's friend, this guy named Supreme, who was the head of the Supreme big drug gang, this other brother named Chaz. And we talked about how do we do just that, right? How do we work? How do we help folks who are coming home? How do we help folks stay out? And so we came up with this VIP system that was later adapted into the CMS. And but what I failed to realize is that these are hurt and traumatized brothers and sisters coming home, that just the idea of getting sunlight and being on the basketball court was traumatizing to them, because being inside and being on the basketball court, there was a guy up in a tower with a gun that if somebody did something, they were shooting into the field, right? And so all of the different traumas that came with the individuals, and if you had a staff of 20, you got at least 10 formerly incarcerated men and women with their own personal trauma. And so I was unprepared at the beginning to deal with that, because the model that the cure violence model that the system forced us to use didn't include helping the staff heal, right? It didn't include, it's very narrow in what it does. And so we said, you have to add healing, right? Because not only do we have to heal the participants, the first level of participants in transformation is our staff. And so helping them come home and get access to healing and transformation was the first and most necessary thing. And it brought these brothers and sisters who are now leading, some of them leading city government offices and really heading up and guiding this work, because they went through their transformation. But I want to make it very clear to folks, if you don't help these folks heal and regenerate into the system, you can't really find success for those individuals. So it's very important.
Thank you so much. So we're just about 2 minutes out.
So
I'm gonna ask each of you in 30 seconds or less to leave Baltimore with what you consider its charge to be, as individuals, as a village, as a collective, to do the work necessary to heal, not only ourselves, but to be the co-facilitators of each other's healing. Greg, we'll start with you. E, I'm closing with you.
Can you come back to me? Can I pass it to Erica?
We can start with Erica.
Sorry.
yeah,
We'll get you in the middle, Greg.
Yeah, so I would say for Voltron, you don't know everything. Stop, breathe, and think before you implement rules and regulations and policies that impact people's life. Be fully present for every single person. Be fully present and learn how to form Voltron. It must be comprehensive.
The geek girl in me loved the form Voltron, by the way, just to let you know. So yes, Greg, coming to you, and then we're gonna close the panel with E.
I think that the charge I would share is never underestimate your story and your voice. You know, when I was in the hospital, you know, suffering from violence, I remember I was just sharing what happened, and I felt so vulnerable. But I learned very quickly there's a lot of power in vulnerability, and there's a lot of power in surviving the trauma that you've been through. And I've been able to share that voice with my family, with my friends, and with the White House and members of Congress and celebrities, you know, and anyone that's of influence. That story hits just as hard as it did the first time in the hospital. And I think if more of us start to speak up and humanize our struggles, I think that's the voice that's needed to kind of push about change. So that would be one thing I would charge everyone. And also a second thing is, don't assume someone else is already doing the work. Because I know Erica and I learned really fast that we thought it was a whole bunch of people in Congress fighting for us, and we got there and it was just us. Like, whoa, where's everybody else? And so never assume other people are doing the work, because there's a lot more work out. There's more than enough work out here to do. All right, pass it up.
Okay, I
They
see
left
it's
you with
one-
about 15, 20 seconds. So
seconds, I
talk
see.
fast.
So it's answer the call on your heart. All of us have little nudges that nudge us every day. Call this person, stop what you're doing right now, get up and go eat and pee. Like there are little nudges that you get all the time that we often ignore. And they are higher callings from your soul to do what you are here to do. So just answer those small calls and nudges on your heart.
Thank you all so much for joining us today for the Healing City Baltimore Summit. We appreciate your insights, your wisdom, your lived experience as it relates to doing the work of healing our city, and look forward to continuing to be your partners in this space. Be well, friends. Love y'all.